light? Well, we know things like stars emit light. And we say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that they are emitting, radiating photons. Photons are little energy packets that we call light. And they're actually at this quantum levels, which means that you can't divide them. They're at that kind of indivisible level. And they do all sort of strange things because they're at the quantum level. And of course, they leave the sun and they go the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. And I think it takes 8 minutes for one of these particles to fly through space and finally get to Earth. And so what happens then? Well, the sun bombards the Earth with all these photons, and we call it day. And we say, well, it's day out. But if we get to the visual part of this, of course, the photons are actually making contact with the eye, and they have to go through all these different various parts of the eye. Most of it gets lost. But some of these photons reach the back of the eye, the retina, and that's where this process of transduction takes place. And transduction is really a mystical thing. I mean, I remember teaching it in sensation perception. Like, we kind of know what it's about, but the process takes energy from the outside world and transforms it into neural language, something the brain can understand. And so these photons make contact with the retina. This transduction takes place, and then suddenly we're not dealing with photons anymore. We're dealing with neurological language. And then those neurons, through synapses, communicate all the way back to the visual cortex, the back of the brain, and somehow these result in what we call vision, an illuminated world of light. Here's the problem. Where is the light? It says it's not in the photon because, as I described, if you look at the sun is light. And so light is anything that emits photons. But then if we take a photon, it itself does not emit photons. So these little photons themselves can't be light. And that doesn't even matter, though, because once they get transformed into neurological language, there's definitely no light present. I mean, there's no light going. It's just, talk about one of the darkest caves, I'm sure, inside your skull. It's absolutely zero light. So there's no light out there, and there's no light inside. So where is the light? And here's where consciousness plays a role. Consciousness is what is illuminating the universe. It's not light because it's not out there. The only thing that illuminates, and what we call vision. So, see the light. We always talk about that as being so connected to let there be light. It's so connected to what we would call conscious experience. And that's for one reason, because what we call light is consciousness.
Scientists have found that neurons in mammalian brains are capable of producing photons of light, or biophotons. The photons appear within the visible spectrum. They range from near-infrared through violet, or between 200 and 1,300 nanometers. They have an exciting suspicion that our brain's neurons might be able to communicate through light, and suspect that our brain might have optical communication channels, but they have no idea what could be communicated. Even more exciting, they claim that if there is an optical communication happening, the biophotons our brains produce might be affected by quantum entanglement, meaning there can be a strong link between these photons, our consciousness, and possibly what many cultures and religions refer to as spirit. In a couple of experiments, scientists discovered that rat brains can pass just 1 biophoton per neuron a minute, but human brains could convey more than 1 billion biophotons per second. This raises the question, could it be possible that the more light one can produce and communicate between neurons, the more conscious they are? If there is any correlation between biophotons, light, and consciousness, it can have strong implications that there is more to light than we are aware of.
If a student today should ask what creates the force of electricity, his teacher will reply, photons. The student may be satisfied, but in fact, no explanation has been provided. There is something about having a label for things which makes most people feel that they understand, even when they don't. Milo Wolf. So then, following the sentiment expressed in Milo Wolf's quote, what actually is a photon? In other words, rather than simply assign a label, how can we truly understand the nature of that which reality, fundamentally, appears to be made of? Within the context of the modern scientific approach, Answering questions about the nature of reality involves describing the structure of what we are able to observe, and according to contemporary scientific consensus, we are able to describe this structure fairly well. Current consensus is that the photon is both a wave and a particle, and that it arises as an excitation of a fundamental field. Possibly more fundamentally, a photon may be a vibrating string existing as part of a multidimensional manifold that forms the basis for any and all wave particles. In any case, while answers like this are certainly profound in their own right, they do not really deal with the essence of the question. To those of us that developed within cultures that espouse this worldview, the question of what photons, fields, or strings actually are may very well seem pointless to ask, because the very methods that we have been taught to use do not contain within them a way to answer them. Not that they don't have an answer yet, but rather that they possess no way to find the answer, let alone deal with the implications of what this answer might be. With respect to the fundamental nature of reality, they create a feedback loop of ignorance. For all conceivable intents and purposes that are formed within the context of this intellectually objective worldview, the ability to objectively describe and manipulate matter is all that there needs to be. Who cares about trying to know what the substance of the wave particle is, since it's apparently impossible to intellectually describe, and especially if that process doesn't allow you to do anything new?